Hello and welcome to the Following Truth Bible study on YouTube. As always, I'm your host, LJ. In this video, we're going to be looking at Ezekiel's vision of God's throne and put my explanation of what it means. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help with the YouTube algorithms and stuff. So if you would like to be notified of future videos that I put up, make sure that you do put that subscribe button. Okay. Thank you very much for joining me and looking into what is a complex study. So Ezekiel's vision of God's throne is a very complex and perplexing vision. Many people throughout history have broken down the vision and tried to explain it. One of these explanations being ancient aliens, as asserted by the likes of Eric von Daniken in his book Chariots of the Gods, which was first published in 1968. And later, this was also asserted by an ex-NASA engineer, Joseph F. Blumrich, in his book, The Spaceships of Ezekiel, that was published in 1974, which he wrote after reading Daniken's book. Now, he claimed that it was only now, that was in 1974, that we were able to explain the craft using the latest engineering knowledge that was available in, obviously, 1974 when he wrote the book. Of course, this was after man had conquered space travel and supposedly gone to the moon. Now, I shall share my screen and I will show you the cover of Blumrich's book. So if I can try and show you this. So this was his book, the Spaceships of Ezekiel. And now, I don't know if you can see that picture, but that is the picture, the depiction that he has on his, that's the cover of the book. Now, I don't think that in realistic terms, that is an accurate depiction of one of what Ezekiel's depicts. But also in realistic terms, I mean, we're talking 1974. This has got like helicopter propellers on it type thing. I don't really think that that's going to be zooming around space. So the image that he's depicted, and this was what he presumed was now knowledge available to us that wasn't available to us before, and it was only now in his time. But I don't really think that that was something that was going to be able to go around space and space travel. I don't think that was the likelihood. Now, others have asserted that Ezekiel's vision was the incorporation of Babylonian astrological symbolism. That's been asserted by the likes of Dr. Michael Heiser. And if you've ever read anything from Heiser, you'll be fully aware of the kind of beliefs that he has, including the two-power theology, two powers in heaven, that he asserts as well. So because of the difficult nature of the vision and the images that are depicted within the vision that Ezekiel has, it has caused the aforementioned interpretations, plus a whole movement of Jewish mysticism, chariot mysticism. The vision of Ezekiel has been considered dangerous and even impossible for the human mind to understand by some of the Jewish rabbis and sages throughout the time. In the Mishnah Hagigah 2.1, it actually states, one may not expound upon the sexual rules of Leviticus 18 and 20 in front of 3 students, about creation, Genesis 1, in front of 2 students, or the chariot in Ezekiel 1 in front of even 1 student, unless they be wise and already understand it on their own. And like I say, it has been, it was at times considered to be, not that Ezekiel wasn't scripture or wasn't, something that should be read. It was just considered very, very difficult and almost impossible for human beings to understand. So the first thing that we have to do is ask ourselves when trying to decipher the vision is, what view do we have of Ezekiel's vision? Is Ezekiel's vision derived from his own mind, which he based on Babylonian imagery? Or did Ezekiel really see ancient aliens? Or is the image derived from the inspiration of God? Now, if Ezekiel's image of God's chariot is not God-inspired, but in fact the work of his own imagination, and he indeed did base it on the religious images of the Babylonians, then there really isn't anything of any spiritual value in the image at all. In fact, it could be asked as to what value this image has, if any. It would not, in fact, be a vision, but rather would be nothing more than one man's own imagination, that he utilized images that he had seen and just incorporated them. However, if the vision that Ezekiel depicts is God-derived and God-inspired, then it would be more than a little strange that God would use pagan imagery in that vision to his prophet, especially the imagery of a nation where he was going to be sending his people into exile for their idolatry and incorporation of pagan worship and the use of pagan symbolism. Obviously, this was before the full Babylonian captivity. Now, Ezekiel obviously was in Babylon at the time. Now, it is my belief that Ezekiel's vision was indeed God-inspired. I believe that God did not use Babylonian imagery in his vision that he gave Ezekiel, and that there is context and a spiritual meaning behind the image that Ezekiel was shown. Now, I shall be looking at the vision from that perspective, from the perspective that it is God-derived, and that is my belief. So I won't be addressing really the claims against the alien in kind of vision or the visitation of ancient alien vessels in this particular study, and with the Babylonian imagery as well. So I have written against that in other places. Thank you very much, Louise. It is an interesting subject. I hope you stick around, and hopefully you may be able to get a better understanding of what that image is, and what the vision means. Whether you agree is another thing. But like I say, I'm going to be presenting my understanding of what this vision is. And I won't be specifically looking at the other understandings of the aliens or the Babylonian imagery. I'm going to be taking it on the basis that this is God-derived, and I'll argue against why I don't agree with this being ancient aliens. Obviously, I believe in God, and I do believe that this is God-derived, and I'll argue against those in another writing, another study, maybe. So in this study, we will not only look at the vision that Ezekiel was shown, but also the purpose of Ezekiel's vision. And we must remember that this vision shouldn't be taken literally. It was only a visual representation of God's spiritual throne. Ezekiel didn't really literally see God or God's literal throne. So in order to understand the vision, we must first know some basics about Ezekiel. So we need to go and have a little backstory. So at the time of Ezekiel's vision, he was in Babylon amongst the first wave of Israelite captives. Now, this was 11 years before the destruction of the temple and the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians. And Ezekiel actually never did return back to his homeland. Ezekiel 1:1. Now, it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th moon in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. So obviously this is Ezekiel in Babylon. As I say, he was taken in that first wave of captives. And it was kind of basically only in that first wave, it was like the more important people of the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin and Levi. And it was the kind of the more important people that were taken into Babylon before the full captivity that happened 11 years later. So this was before the siege of Jerusalem and the temple being destroyed, both of which Ezekiel actually prophesied of throughout his teachings. Now, we must also understand that Ezekiel's prophecies came over an approximate 20-year period in 3 separate periods. During the rest of the time, Ezekiel's tongue was actually fixed by God to the roof of his mouth so that he could not speak. Ezekiel's life as a prophet was, it must be said, a rather hard one, which included the death of his own wife, and that is understood that happened at the very moment that the temple was destroyed. By the time that Ezekiel prophesied, it was too late to avoid the destruction of the temple, and Ezekiel's prophecy was to portray this. Unlike the prophecies of Jeremiah, where the destruction of the temple could have been avoided, Jeremiah and Ezekiel lived around the same time, and their lives actually overlapped, although Jeremiah was prophesying earlier than Ezekiel. And Jeremiah taught that the destruction of the temple could have been avoided if they listened to him. But obviously the Jewish people, the southern tribes, they didn't listen to the prophecies of Jeremiah. And so by the time that Ezekiel is called and becomes a prophet, it is actually too late for to avoid that destruction. And now Ezekiel is prophesying that the destruction of the temple and the captivity is going to happen. So let's have a look at the vision that Ezekiel was shown. And let me share my screen again, so we can read that together. Okay, hopefully you will be able to see that. So Ezekiel 1:4, and I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of man, and every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings. And their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides, and they 4 had their faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They went every one straight forward. As the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. And they went every one straight forward, whither the Spirit was to go. They went, and they turned not when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. So this is a difficult passage. This is a difficult vision, and it's not really hard if you just take it as that kind of block without breaking it down. It's not hard to see why the sages and the rabbis would say that this is too difficult for just like the normal common man to be able to understand. Now, I don't believe that is true. I think that we can understand this image, this vision, but I understand why it would be seen that way. It is quite difficult. Now, if you've previously watched my video, the last video that I actually did was describing and looking at what heavenly beings look like, and the angels, the cherubim, the seraphim. I went through basically describing what each of those look like, so the heavenly beings, and we've basically, in that video, I did look at some of the creatures which are described in in this vision, specifically the cherubim. So let's break down this vision. So Ezekiel sees the image coming towards him. Now notice that we have the whirlwind coming from out of the north. So in Ezekiel 1:4. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. This is often overlooked. It's an overlooked piece of information. It is the north that is associated with the throne of God. And we see that in verses such as Psalm 48:2. Beautiful for a situation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. And is in Isaiah 14:13. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Now, Jeremiah was told by the Lord that the disaster would be poured out from the north. Jeremiah 1:14. Then the Lord said unto me, out of the north an evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. We also see a reference to the cloud of fire, the similarities to the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire in which the angel of God's presence resided, which guided the Israelites in the wilderness. It shouldn't be ignored. Exodus 13:21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night. So we see that in that one verse in Ezekiel 1:4, we're given the information about the north, and also about the pillar of or the cloud, and the fire, which obviously we get back in Exodus as well. Ezekiel then mentions the 4 living creatures that he sees in Ezekiel 1:5. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Now these 4 creatures were not actually men, but had the likeness, the form of men. The Hebrew demuth means a likeness or similitude. Now, Ezekiel later describes these 4 living creatures as being cherubim in his second vision of the chariot, which we can find in chapter 10, Ezekiel 10:20. This is the living creature that I saw under the God of Israel by the river of Chebar, and I knew that they were cherubims. So they were cherubim that looked like men, or they were in the shape or form of men. Ezekiel then refers to the 4 creatures as one creature, which would attest to their uniformity. Each one looking and maybe acting exactly the same as the other, because obviously they've all got 4 faces, they've all got the wings and the straight feet, so they all have the same image as one another. Now, many Bible versions get this incorrect and use living creatures, plural, such as the NIV. These were the living creatures. Now, the KJV, which I read from first, says this is the living creature that I saw. But the NIV has, these were the living creatures I had seen beneath the God of Israel. The Hebrew is in the singular feminine, and it's describing them as one being, one singular being. So that uniformity, that singularity is being portrayed there in the Hebrew, that it doesn't come out in many modern versions. Now, these are the same cherubim, that were in the temple. Only now Ezekiel is seeing them as an actual being rather than simply the statues that he would have been so familiar with. Ezekiel was of the line of priesthood, which would have meant that at the age of 30 he would have become a priest had he remained in Jerusalem. And we see that we can look at those cherubim in the what the priests would have been familiar with. So that's in 1 Kings 6:23. And within the oracle he made 2 cherubims of olive tree, each 10 cubits high, and 5 cubits was the one wing of the cherubim, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherubim. From the uttermost part of the one wing unto the uttermost of the part of the other were 10 cubits, and the other cherubim was 10 cubits. Both the cherubims were of one measure and one size. The height of the one cherub was 10 cubits, and so was it of the other cherub. And he set the cherubims within the inner house, and they stretched forth the wings of the cherubim, so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall. And their wings touched one another in the midst of the house, and he overlaid the cherubims with gold. So these are the cherubim that are in the temple. Now it is worthy of note that while the cherubim are considered a type of angelic or angel or angelic being, we've dealt with this in the previous video. They are probably not angels, but just heavenly spirits, heavenly beings. Now, we also see that the cherubim were placed by God to keep the way of the tree of life, which was in Genesis 3. And of course, we have the 2 carved cherubim that were either end of the mercy seat. And then we see that in Exodus 25:17 through 22. Now, in verse 13, Ezekiel adds more information about their appearance in the fact that they had the appearance of fire and a lamp. A lamp of fire may be like what we would get with the Olympic torch. Lapid, which is the lamp, that's the Hebrew lapid. It means torch. Ezekiel 1:13. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. So while each cherubim was in the form of a man, they also looked like fire in their appearance. Now, fire is a vital piece of information that we will look at in more detail in a little bit. Angels in the Bible seem to simply look like men. They are often mistaken for men. And like I say, we've covered that in that video. Now, each cherubim is described as having 4 faces and also wings. Ezekiel 1:6. And every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings. The faces of the cherubim are described as being one as of the face of a man, one of the face of a lion, one as the face of an ox, and one as the face of an eagle in Ezekiel 1:10. Now, Rabbi Rashi stated that the sages understood the face of the man, so the man, or of those 4 faces, obviously one of them is a man. He stated that they understood, or the sages understood this to be the man to resemble Jacob. And he also understood that each angel had 4 faces. So what in that way he understood them to have 4 of each 4. So he stated, and each one had 4 faces. Each one means that the human countenance had 4 faces, as did the lion, the eagle, and the ox. So he actually had that totaling 16 faces to one living being. It was thus for each living being and 4 wings for each of the faces, totaling 64 wings for each living being. So 4 times. This is why he says that Jonathan paraphrased 256 wings, and that's Rashi on Ezekiel 1:6. So this is not the way that I would interpret that, and I personally wouldn't understand that each being had 4 of each face. So I understand that to be 1 of each face for the 4 cherubim, but that's how Rashi understood it. While it is likely, as many do point out, that all of this was to symbolize God's creation. The cherubim, they represented man. The wild animals were the work animals and birds. So the ox, the lion, and the birds being represented by the eagle. So this represented God's creation: man, wild animals, the work animals, and the birds. It should be noted that there is a lack of fish being represented, and so I don't feel that this is the correct understanding of what this actually means. I understand this to be the 4 faces are more likely to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, as they were instructed by God to align in the camps of the Israelites around the tabernacle. Now, we need to sidetrack here out of Ezekiel just for a moment to get a full understanding of why I believe this. So we go back to Numbers, and the Lord, so this is Numbers 2:1, and the Lord spake unto Moses and said unto Aaron, saying, every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard with the ensign of their father's house, for far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch. Now, the word standard is the Hebrew word digel, meaning banner. Each tribe had a banner that represented that tribe. So they had a banner, as anybody that's kind of watched Game of Thrones recently, or you would know that going into war, each house had their own banner, and their bannermen would carry their image, their depiction of what that represented their house. And each of the 12 tribes had their own banner, their own image that would represent the tribes. And each tribe had a banner that represented that tribe. However, on each side in this alignment that God had instructed the Israelites, there would be 3 tribes on each side of that 4. So the 12 tribes are split into 3. So there are 4 sets of 3 tribes. And each of those tribes, those sets of 3, had a head tribe. So on the east side were the tribes of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And Judah was the head tribe. That's in Numbers 2:3. And on the east side, toward the rising of the sun, shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies. And Nushun, the son of Amminadab, shall be captain of the children of Judah and his host. And those that were numbered of them were 14,600. And those that do pitch next unto him shall be the tribe of Issachar, and Nathaniel, the son of Zuar, shall be captain of the children of Issachar, and his host. And those that were numbered thereof were 54,400. And the tribe of Zebulun, and Eliab, the son of Helon, shall be captain of the children of Zebulun, and his host. And those that were numbered thereof were 57,400. And that were numbered in the camp of Judah were 100,000 and fourscore thousand and 6,400 throughout their armies. These shall first set forth. Now on the south side were the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, and Reuben being the head tribe, and that's in Numbers 2:10. I won't read all of that now, but it says, on the south side shall be the standard of the camp of Reuben, according to their armies, and the captain of children of Reuben shall be Elizur, the son of Shedeur. And then we have the numbers, and then we have the name of Simeon and Gad also represented in that south side. On the west side were the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. And Ephraim was the head tribe of the tribes of the west side in Numbers 2:18 through. And on the west side shall be the standard of the camp of Ephraim according to their armies. And that goes through until verse 24. And on the north side were the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Dan was the head tribe of those tribes of the north. Numbers 2:25, and the standard of the camp of Dan shall be on the north side of their armies. So according to rabbinic tradition, Judah is represented by a lion. Ephraim is represented by an ox, Reuben by a head or human head, and Dan by an eagle or a serpent. Now these match the four faces of the cherubim. So the main banner of each side, so the south, north, east, and west, the main tribe, the banner is represented by a lion, ox, a head, and an eagle. So it is very possible that we don't have direct scripture which would depict these specific representations, but we do have scriptures that would at least support them. It is possible that these cherubim represent those four leading tribes. Now, if we go to Judah, it is referred to as a lion in Genesis 49:9. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down. He couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? Reuben means, behold, a son or man. Genesis 29:32. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction now, therefore my husband will love me. So it is like, it means son. Ephraim is represented by a bull or an ox, Deuteronomy 33:17. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of a unicorn. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. Bullock being the Hebrew shor, which means a bull or an ox. And Dan means a judge. Genesis 36. And Rachel said, God has judged me and has also heard my voice and has given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan, because she's been judged. Now the eagle is often used as a depiction of divine judgment. For example, in Deuteronomy 28:49, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. So the divine judgment is represented by that eagle. Now, verse 6 also tells us that each cherubim had 4 wings. So I find it strange that Rashi managed to get all of the understanding of those 4 times 4 wings in each one. So it just says Ezekiel 1:6, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings. In verse 9, we are told that the cherubim never turn when they went in that direction. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They went every one straight forward. Now the meaning of that is that in whatever direction they went, they would always have one face facing that way. And so it would always appear that 2 wings would be outstretched. And so if you imagine that the head of the face, the man is this way, then we've on this side, it's not the side of a face, it's an ox, or and this side is the eagle, and at the back it's the lion, so it's the face. So whichever way they are facing, there is always a face facing that way. Now Rashi stated they did not turn when they walked. If they wished to walk in any desired direction, they did not need to turn their faces, because they have faces on every side. Therefore, each one went in the direction of his face, in the direction of the face on that side where they desired to go. They would go, and that's Rashi on Ezekiel. Now, when we look back at the cherubim that were at each end of the mercy seat in the tabernacle, the cherubim were depicted as having 2 wings in 1 Kings 6:23 through 28. Now, it is very likely that one of each of the 4 faces were represented in each direction. So there are 4 angels, and so when the 4 angels are facing straight on, each one would have a different face. So you would have the 4 faces: the man, the eagle, the lion, and the ox, all on the different angel or cherubim. Now, regardless of which way you looked at them, they would have those same 4 faces, because they would be set up in a way that while one was facing man's face, the other would be facing with the ox, with the eagle, and with the lion, and that would, in each 4 directions, you would have those 4 faces facing. So it would kind of, whichever way you were looking at the throne, those cherubim would look exactly the same. Now, it also states that so it is very likely that the one of the faces is facing out, and each creature, it is described as each creature had a wheel next to it in Ezekiel 1:15. Now as I behold the living creatures, behold one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his four faces. That now, what as I explained in when I did those the depiction of what the heavenly beings look like, the wheel inside the wheel is very misunderstood, I think, and often you'll see like a flat wheel with another wheel inside of it, and that's the kind of depiction that often this is the kind of image that most people understand it. But I kind of understand it as in like a cross shape, but because they're circular, it kind of almost forms like a sphere shape. So it doesn't matter which way they go around. And I did show a picture of that as well. So it wouldn't matter which way they went, it would still be going around, but it wouldn't need to rotate in order to move in that direction. Now, each wheel had, like I say, a wheel inside of it. And so, like I say, that's how I understand it. Two interlocking wheels that form kind of that cross shape. So the wheels are kind of being described as omnidirectional, so they don't need to change. It's almost like a ball shape. They don't need to change. The cherubim don't need to change direction. So the throne is doesn't matter which way that it's moving. It doesn't need to change. So it's kind of like representation that God doesn't change. It just moves in that direction. It looks exactly the same in each direction, and there's no need for God to change the way that he is in order to move in a certain direction. And I kind of understand it being that kind of meaning. The chariot could move in all four directions without actually having to move. And so this, like I say, it represents God's ability to move. Now, unlike before, where God was understood to dwell only in the temple in Jerusalem, that was kind of where God dwelt. Here, the chariot is being depicted as being mobile, and not only mobile, but with the ability to go in any direction, yet always remaining the same. Now, it is that mobility that is important to Ezekiel's full teaching. God is the God of everywhere. In Jeremiah 23:23, I am God at hand, saith the Lord, and not a God afar off. And the importance of that can't be underestimated or understated. While the Jews would be carried off into exile in Babylon, and the temple was going to be destroyed, God was still with them. He would not allow them to be totally destroyed. He would follow them into the exile, and eventually bring them back out of that exile. He was going to go with them. And that's that mobility, is that he isn't just in the temple. He is able to move, and he will go wherever they go, and he will be with them. Now we find in Isaiah 51, thus saith the Lord, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement? Whom have I put away? Of which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities have ye sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away. So God is basically saying that you've been put away because of the iniquities of you, but I have not divorced you. I have not given up, basically, on you. I won't give up on you. And while you will be sold into captivity, basically taken into captivity, you did this yourselves because of your iniquities, but I am going to be with you. And so they were going to have to suffer the consequences of what they did and of their iniquities, but still God was going to, the Jewish people would return, and God would not completely destroy them. And that was something that was meant to kind of give the Israelites, the Jewish people, throughout time. They've been told many times by God that they're going to be punished for their iniquities and following after other nations and other gods and stuff. But God has made a promise. God made a promise to Abraham that his seed through eventually would come through. So it would go through Isaac, Jacob, and through that lineage. So that promise of the Messiah, that of Jesus, was always going to come to fulfillment. And so the Jewish nation could not ever be totally destroyed. And that was the promise of God, that although individual Israelites, individual Jews may suffer and come to death, even to be put to death in certain places, God was never going to completely destroy them. And obviously the tribe of Judah, which is where the Messiah was going to come through, that could never be destroyed. The lineage of King David could never be completely destroyed. There always had to be a remnant of the Jewish people. Now, Ezekiel describes the rings, the rims of the wheels, as being so high that they were dreadful. They were fearful, for their height was so great, in Ezekiel 1:18. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them four. So the rims of the wheels were full of eyes. Now, unlike the assertion by some that these eyes actually mean stars, and this is a total misunderstanding of what these eyes represent. And you'll see sometimes in depictions of these the wheels, the rims, they've got stars in them, and this is a total misrepresentation. They are eyes. It means eyes. The Hebrew ayin, which means eye, it appears 887 times in the Bible, and it never once refers to stars, or in context does it ever refer in relation to stars. There is no biblical support for that claim. It means eyes. It is full of eyes. Ezekiel 1:19. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the spirit was to go, they went thither, and their spirit to go. And the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. The eyes represented the ability of God to see in all directions, something that Ezekiel addresses, saying that the Israelites' iniquity was great, and that the Israelites said that God could not see, Ezekiel 9:9. Then said he unto me, The iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great, and the land is full of blood, and the city full of perverseness. For they say, the Lord hath forsaken the earth, and the Lord seeth not. So the Israelites believed, or they thought they could do whatever they wanted because they were God's people, and that God was no longer in the earth. He had forsaken the earth, and that he didn't see. And so these eyes, which are in the wheels, which face in any direction, represent God's ability to always see, to see everything in all directions. There is no hiding. Further biblical attestation can be found throughout the Bible. Proverbs 15:3, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, holding the evil and the good. Eyes here is the Hebrew ayin, which is exactly the same as what we get eyes in the wheels. Hebrews 4:13, neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. Jeremiah 16:17, for mine eyes are upon all their ways, they are not hid from my face, neither is there iniquity hid from mine eyes. So God is basically stating, it doesn't matter what you do, I can see it. You can't hide your iniquity from God. And I could quote many, many other verses where that depiction of God being able to see everything. Ezekiel then describes the firmament above the heads of the cherubim, which was the color of terrible crystal. Ezekiel 1:22, and the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature, and was the color of terrible crystal, stretched forth over their heads above. Now, crystal being the Hebrew kerach, which means frost or ice, and terrible being yar, meaning fear. The firmament being a fearful, awesome crystal ice color. Now, the sound of the winds like great waters, as the voice of the Almighty. That's what Ezekiel says in 1:24. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of an host. When they stood, they let down their wings. Now we get the same comparison in John's vision in Revelation 1:15, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. So that's the same as in Ezekiel. Then came a voice from the firmament, Ezekiel 1:25. And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let their wings down. Now Ezekiel saw the likeness of the throne. Again, this is just the form of. Ezekiel is very clear to repeat the words likeness and appearance. It would seem that he wants to emphasize that this is not to be in any way taken to be literal image, but simply the resemblance of. So there is an understanding with what the visual representation means, but it's not to be taken that this is what the literal throne of God would look like. What Ezekiel saw are nothing more than symbolic representations of what I think that I'm explaining in this. In verse 26, we are told that the throne had the appearance of sapphire stone. Ezekiel 1:26, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, or as the appearance of a sapphire stone. Now, this sapphire color is also what Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 of the elders saw back in Exodus 24 upon the mountain, Mount Sinai. Exodus 24:10. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet as it were a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were the body of heaven in the clearness. There was a figure that looked like a man above the throne in verse 26, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. Again, this must not be taken as Ezekiel literally seeing God upon the throne. Ezekiel yet again reiterates likeness and appearance. So, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. Ezekiel only actually saw the lower part of the man that sat on the throne. He describes this as having the appearance of fire and the brightness around about it in verse 27. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire around about within it, from the appearance of the loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downwards. I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about. Now, the Hebrew word Naga literally means brightness. And at the end of the vision, Ezekiel recognized that what he saw was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, Yahweh, and fell on his face. In verse 28, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. So again, we have a reference to the brightness, which Ezekiel compares to a rainbow in the sky on a rainy day. And this was the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Now, if you see other images throughout the Old Testament, there's a lot of brightness, and especially when we're talking about the glory of the Lord. And this kind of represents that shine, that brightness. Is almost like the whiteness comes across as being pure, and that the complete brightness of God being totally and utterly beyond representation of pureness. Now, we should take note of the reference to the fire. The fire represents the very presence of God. We are told in both the Old Testament and the New Testament that God is a consuming fire. Deuteronomy 4:24, for the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. And that is quoted or again referred to in Hebrews in the New Testament in 12:29. For our God is a consuming fire. God descended out of Mount Sinai in a fire, Exodus 19:18, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in a fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. The sight of God's glory on Mount Sinai was like a devouring fire, Ezekiel 24:17, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. We must also note that the image of the cherubim themselves had come from the midst of the fire, Ezekiel 1:4. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst thereof the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. The whole vision that Ezekiel saw was in the fire of the presence of God. In the book of Isaiah, there are a couple of very specific questions that are asked. Who can dwell with the devouring fire? And who shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Isaiah 33:14. The sinners of Zion are afraid. Fearfulness hath surprised the hypocrites. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Now, the answer, which is given in the very next verse, might surprise many people, especially those that believe in a literal hell and burning and torture in the fires of hell. It is those that walk righteously and speak uprightly that will dwell with the fire. God is that fire. God is the consuming fire. And it is the righteous that will dwell with that fire. Isaiah 33:15. He that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly, he that despiseth the gain of oppressions, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stop his ear from hearing of blood, and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. It is God's very presence that is the fire that consumes, but it consumes the wicked and not the righteous. Only the righteous can dwell within God's presence. God's presence is shown in the burning bush, Exodus 3:2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. The bush represented the righteousness. It was not consumed. The righteous will not be consumed in the fire. When we go to Daniel 7:10, we get the image of the river of fire, which again represents God's very presence, and those that stood in front of him are judged. Daniel 7:10, and a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands and thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. It is the unrighteous, the wicked, that will be destroyed in the lake of fire, which is the very presence of God. Only the righteous can survive in his presence. God's very presence will be what destroys the wicked. Now, Ezekiel's vision symbolizes the Lord's presence upon his throne, which is this fire representation. But it is also important to understand why Ezekiel was given this vision. Ezekiel was called by God to go unto the children of Israel, who God referred to as a rebellious nation. Ezekiel 2:1. And he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak. And he spake unto me, and said, Set me upon my feet, that I heard him that spake unto me. And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel to be to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. Ezekiel was given a number of visual representations to give to the Israelites to depict the coming destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. In chapter 4 of Ezekiel, he was instructed by God to lie on his left side for 390 days to represent the iniquity of the house of Israel, and then on his right side for 40 days to represent the iniquity of the house of Judah. Each day represented 1 year. Now, by doing this, he was predicting the destruction of Jerusalem. Ezekiel 4:4. Lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. For I have laid upon you the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. So Ezekiel had to lie on his side to bear the iniquity of the house of Israel 390 days to represent 1 year for all of their iniquity, 390 years of iniquity. And when thou have accomplished them, lie again on their right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. Therefore thou shalt set thy face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and thine arm shall be uncovered, and thou shalt prophesy against it. And behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to another, till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. Now, it's important to know that Jeremiah had predicted the destruction of Jerusalem, as we've already stated. However, after the first wave of Israelites were taken to Babylon, the city and the temple still remained. This led many Israelites to actually believe that the destruction of the temple would not happen as it was foretold by Jeremiah. They actually believed that it was not going to happen because it hadn't happened. And after that first wave in which Ezekiel was taken, they believed that that was it. That was the full realization of what Jeremiah was actually depicting. Now, the siege of Jerusalem was because of their idolatry. But Ezekiel continued to preach the forthcoming destruction with the proclamation that it would happen so that they, the Israelites, would know that he was the Lord. Yet God promised to save a remnant of Israel, as we know that he has to save a remnant of Israel in Ezekiel 6:8. Yet I will leave a remnant, that ye may have some that shall escape the sword among the nations, when ye shall be scattered through the countries. And this is also found in chapter 11. Before the city was destroyed, Ezekiel saw the glory of the Lord leave the temple in Ezekiel 10:18. Then the glory of the Lord departed from off the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubims. And the cherubims lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight when they went out. The wheels also were beside them, and every one stood at the door of the east gate of the Lord's house. And the glory of the Lord, of the God of Israel, was over them above. The glory then left the city entirely in Ezekiel 11:22. Then did the cherubims lift up their wings, and the wheels beside them, and the glory of the God of Israel was over them above. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain, which is on the east side of the city. Afterwards, the Spirit took me up and brought me in a vision by the Spirit of God into Chaldea, to them of the captivity. So the vision that I had seen went up from me. Then I spoke unto them of the captivity, all the things that the Lord had showed me. So we see that the glory of the Lord, which was always in the temple, was now leaving the temple, and then it left the city. It left Jerusalem. And this was to show that God was no longer protecting Jerusalem and the people in the city, and that destruction was going to come upon them. He'd left. And so that destruction, that temple, this is the first temple, remember, that first temple was now free to be destroyed because God was no longer in it. He was no longer protecting it. And that's really important, that God's protection over the city had left. He was no longer residing in the city as that understanding of God residing in the city. Now, it is not long after this that the city, along with the temple, was destroyed, and the southern tribes, the house of Judah, was taken into captivity into Babylon. Now, Ezekiel does continue to prophesy, and he prophesied that the nations would be judged, which obviously does happen to Babylon, and they do return. He prophesied about the restoration of the temple and the return of God's glory to the temple, and then obviously we know that the Babylonians were later destroyed, and the Israelites, that southern tribes from that captivity, returned back to Jerusalem, and the second temple was then built. Okay, so basically that is my understanding of what the vision of Ezekiel actually represents. Now, I understand that it is my interpretation of what the meaning of that vision means, and if you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm perfectly okay with that. If you want to leave a comment, please feel free. If you do disagree, let me know why you disagree, what you disagree with. Do you believe that actually he saw ancient aliens, or maybe you believe that it was just his own imagination, that he had incorporated the Babylonian imagery into it, and this was just the made up vision of Ezekiel himself? Please let me know in the comments. You can obviously, if you would like to contact me, you can do so through my website. There is a contact me page. You can send me an email and I'll try to respond to that. You can contact me on Facebook. You can leave a message here. I would invite people into the if I will do that now. I have to. So it is. If anybody would like to come on and discuss the presentation that I've done, you're more than welcome to do so. You have to basically go and click onto that link, and that would bring you into the chat, and you can discuss the presentation, what I've actually stated in this video. Like I say, whether you agree, whether you disagree. If not, then, as this has been over an hour and coming up an hour and 20 minutes, I'll probably just call it a day and finish. I do appreciate everybody that again watches my videos either live, it comes in and out, or has been here all the time, or whether you watch it at a later date on YouTube. I do appreciate everybody that does watch my videos. It's really important for me, and I do appreciate any feedback that I get, whether you, like I say, whether you agree, disagree. I'm always interested in hearing people's opinions, why they agree with me, why they disagree. I hope it's been interesting. It is a hard topic. It's I understand that it's probably not the kind of topic that is gonna churches on a Sunday, listing those topics that usually get preached inside of churches. But I think that it's important that we understand the Bible in its entirety, and not just specific topics which normally come around about salvation or the Jesus or these types of topics. And in certain churches, you're going to have the preaching of the Sabbath preachings and these types of things. But so I like to go into all different types of topics and study the entirety of the Bible. And I know that there are other people out there that do believe that the whole Bible is important, and that this kind of topic would be of interest to them. So I know it's a more limited topic, but it's to me it's interesting, and I appreciate anybody to. Do I think that someone who believes in the divinity of Jesus is lost? It's kind of a different topic from what I've been looking at. The answer to that is I'm not God. I wouldn't be able to. I know that some Unitarians do believe that. I understand it the opposite way as well. So those that believe in the divinity of Jesus would believe that Unitarians who deny the divinity of Jesus would be lost. The truth is, I wouldn't be able to say. I do believe that it is kind of blasphemy to make a man God. But I also do understand that most people that believe in the divinity of Jesus do believe of him, that he is the Messiah, the one that was the fulfillment of the predictions and the prophecies within the Old Testament. So would I can't say that. I cannot. And I wouldn't. I don't think that, while I do believe that it is blasphemy, ultimately I'm not the judge, and I'm not going to make that call on whether somebody is lost or not. I think that we're all trying to search for truth, and the Bible is a very, very complex thing. It's a book which the Protestant Bible, which obviously I follow, has 66 books in it, and there's a lot of information. There's a lot of doctrine. There's a lot of different opinions about what the Bible says. And that's why there are 40,000 plus denominations. And many of those denominations will say that if you don't believe in what that particular denomination believes in, then you're not saved. That, to me, kind of, because now even those that believe in the Trinity or the divinity of Jesus, even those wouldn't be saved if you're not Catholic, for instance, if you don't follow the Catholic religion. Now, I call it the Catholic religion because I don't believe that it's Christianity, although they have many, many things in common with Christianity. I think it's a very different thing. But they would believe that those that are non-Catholic would not be saved. Then you have people like the Seventh-day Adventists who, if you don't follow the Sabbath, you can't be saved. Then you have other ones, that the Pentecostals, who preach that that if you don't talk in tongues, you're not saved. You can't be saved if you don't talk in tongues. So you have all of these minute pieces of detail that each one would teach, and if you don't follow that specific thing, I've been invited to Christadelphian churches in the past, but Christadelphians believe in that you have to be baptized into the Christadelphian faith, into their belief, or you can't be saved. So regardless of whether you've been baptized into before, if you are not baptized by them, then that baptism doesn't count. And so there are so many different beliefs out there. I just think that we're all trying to search for truth, and we all see truth in a different way. So it's a really difficult, specific topic. It's not a topic that I really I can honestly say what I believe. It is really difficult for me to what I actually believe, because, like I say, I do believe that we shouldn't be blaspheming, but I also believe that we're all searching, and we all believe, and we're genuine. There are many people out there that genuinely believe something because that's how they've read it, that's how they've understood something. And if they're slightly wrong, that they can't be saved, I think that's probably a little bit harsh. I can't speak for God in that way, but I can't believe that God would be so, it's pedantic in that sense, or you weren't baptized into that specific sect of Christianity. So yeah, that's basically, I know I've probably gone on a little bit on that, but yeah. Hopefully God will forgive these people with a false doctrine if they truly believe in Jesus as a Messiah. Yeah. I also don't like to say that someone is lost if he didn't follow a certain doctrine. Yeah. I think it's very difficult for a human being to be able to turn around and say who's saved and who's not saved. I mean, the Bible does state things, but it's about believing Jesus Christ, and it's about believing that he is the Messiah, the one sent by God. The rest of those details, yeah, I think it's a bit difficult for me to say. People should focus more on their own faith and not bother whether others are lost or not. Let people believe what they want. I think it's I think that's kind of correct. That I think that people, there seems to be, when I talk to certain denominations, there seems to be kind of like, if you disagree with them, there's a kind of a hatred, and it's an anger that you're questioning. So I was talking to discussing with somebody of the oneness belief today, and basically it was almost like straight away you're told you don't understand the Bible. If you don't believe in exactly the same way as what I believe it, you don't understand the Bible. And that's the way that a lot of people seem to be. I don't know about whether people are, whether it's about whether they're lost, or whether, I mean, you can state what you believe, and that's all I can do. I've stated how I understand this vision of Ezekiel. Other people may completely disagree with that, with the way that I've interpreted it, and say, well, actually, you have no idea what the Bible states. And that's fine. This is how I understand it. And all I can do is present what I understand. And I can discuss with somebody, and I'm happy to discuss with somebody why they think I'm wrong. And I will try to defend myself and why I believe why this is correct. And that's all I can do. And if somebody is able to present to me in an argument in such a way that I'm willing to change my understanding of any particular doctrine, then I'm willing to change it. And I have done on things before. So I think it's important that we discuss our beliefs, but I think it gets a little bit childish when you turn around and say, right, okay, this is what I believe. And if you don't believe it, you're lost and you're unsaved and you don't understand the Bible. You're unstudied. You've never studied the Bible. You haven't read this verse, or you haven't read. Of course, I've read the entire Bible, and I've read the entire Bible numerous times, all the way through. And in the studies that I've done, probably 20, 30 times in total. It doesn't mean that I haven't read the Bible just because I don't understand something in the way that you understand it. So to say, that you haven't read the Bible I think is a really cheap shot and really childish. And I wouldn't say that to somebody that, oh, you haven't read the Bible. No, you may have read the Bible, but you understand it in a different way. Maybe you are understanding it through the way that you've been told what it means, and that's fine. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't read. There is too much hate in religion. I'm half Arabic and half Jewish, so I had it from both directions. I choose to love. I think, that's an interesting mix, I have to say. I don't know whether that's like half Islam and half Jewish in that way. That would be an interesting mix. But that's what Jesus said, to love as he loved, and that's what we're called to do. We're not. There are misunderstood verses, and people preach that hatred, but I don't think that that's what Jesus taught. And he taught us to love our enemies. So I think that's choosing love is I think the best way, and ultimately what we believe because it's what we understand, what we understand to be correct. Whether that ultimately is wrong is another thing, but people don't believe something that they think is incorrect. So we all believe that what our belief is correct, or otherwise we would change it. So a lot of people are of a certain belief because they've grown up with that specific belief. Their parents were of that specific belief. Now that doesn't happen with everybody, of course, but I think it's quite kind of harsh, and it isn't something that I've kind of thought too much of, and I certainly wouldn't try and state that that what I was saying was correct, but I think it's really harsh that somebody who was a Muslim, for instance, who was born as a Muslim, grew up as a Muslim, grew up in a Muslim country, was only taught that religion, the Islamic religion, didn't come across Jesus, because in some of these countries it's very, very dangerous to be Christian. So in some of these countries, the ability to be exposed to Jesus, and especially to come to Jesus, is really dangerous. That they now, because they didn't find Jesus and kind of really had no ability to find him, are now, destined, as many Christians believe, to hell, to be tortured forever in burning fire, for eternity. I think that's harsh, but that's my own opinion. My grandparents got together before the state of Israel and all of the politics. Prior to that, it was normal for Jewish and Arabs to marry each other in Morocco, and that's where I'm from. Yeah, it's the kind of separation that is being forced upon the Jews and the Arabs to hate each other. I think is very political. And I'm not into, or I am into politics, but I'm not going to get into it on this in this specific chat here. But yeah, that I think that is kind of something that has been kind of forced upon those people, and it's kind of pushed that they must hate each other. I think it's a shame. As you said, they for a long time they kind of lived side by side without all of this bloodshed that goes on now. Okay, yeah, I think that'll do for that specific topic. Okay, so I've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. Unless there's anything else that anybody would like to discuss, I shall finish here and say thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you on another video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Like I say, it really does help my channel, and it obviously also allows you to be notified of when I go live. It is kind of sporadic at the moment because of work, so I'm trying to do it a couple of times a week, not always happening. I am going to try and do another video in the next day or so, if I can get one at the time to do it. But yeah, I just really appreciate everybody that watches the video live or in the future on YouTube on replay. It does mean a lot to me. And I am, like I say, I'm really interested in people's opinions, and I do appreciate anybody that comments and tries to engage in the discussion, and I'm always willing to discuss with people. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully later on this week.